Welcome to Lead the Way with Anna Gauker. Your guide, Anna Gauker, is on a quest of her own to find effective ways of creating change and inclusion in our communities. You have come to the right place if you believe in truth, justice, and coffee. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, this is Lead the Way, and I'm Anna Gauker. All of our content can be found on Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, TuneIn, and Apple Podcasts. While you're with us, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have chosen to join us for this podcast, you are officially a very wise person. I had the chance to speak with Dane County Circuit Court Judge Everett Mitchell. Judge Mitchell's previous roles include Assistant District Attorney in Dane County and Director of Community Relations at UW Madison. As he serves on the bench today, Judge Mitchell is also lead pastor at Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church. Listening to our conversation, I think you will quickly understand why I was so thrilled to have the opportunity to learn about his innovative leadership style and the necessary perspective he brings to his judgeship. I wanted to talk a bit at first about just where you're from and how your career got started.
Yeah. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. So I've been in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, Dane County for about 16 years. I went to undergrad in Atlanta, Georgia at Morehouse College, and then went to seminary at Princeton Theological Seminary before coming here and working for some years before I decided to go to law school and at UW Madison.
What was your major in undergrad?
Mathematics and religion.
Okay. And then what made you decide to go to theology school?
Well, I had planned on becoming a math high school teacher, so I wanted to teach algebra. And
Why?
because that was like the gateway course. It's like if you didn't understand or get algebra, then you couldn't, really advance in higher level mathematics. So it was like teaching algebra could help students kind of prepare to get to the higher level math or physics or chemistry, but you had to have the algebra first.
Mm-hmm. And
So right,
how did your thought process evolve when you were taking those classes?
I always felt I always felt excited about learning and learning new ideas and being exposed to new thought processes around mathematics. I coupled it with religion because I was a young preacher at the age of 15 years old. So I thought, I could do both at the same time.
How did you get into that?
I kind of always been around the church, but I always say it was like the universe deciding to give me an opportunity to speak and hear my voice because at that time my family had been through so much trauma and sexual abuse, and so just a way for the universe to call me. And so God called my name at 15 years old and almost like lit a fire and a passion on the inside of me. And so it's like that fire has been burning ever since.
Do you remember giving your first sermon?
Yes, God's grace and mercy is sufficient. Ephesians chapter 2. Yeah.
And where was that at?
It was at my home church at Harmony Missionary Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
And then you eventually moved to Wisconsin and decided to go to law school. What
Yes.
made you choose that path?
I was working for Madison Area Urban Ministry as the associate director, coordinating our restorative justice programs. So I was seeing all of these young men and women coming out of prison, and they were just being treated so unfairly. And after one experience where one guy was just denied housing outright, or just a job outright, I realized that, or at least I thought in my head that if I was an attorney, they wouldn't treat us like that. So maybe I should go to law school and learn how to sue people, and then they would act differently.
Has that been the truth? Is that your experience?
I think the advocacy of the law at least gives a pause for people, so that they at least both on both sides, both on one side, people can pause before they respond a certain kind of way. But then secondly, it gives people more voice and power because they know that they're not going into these situations by themselves.
Right. And can you tell me more about how you became District County Circuit Court judge and what that job entails?
Yeah, so right after Tony Robinson was killed in 2015, I was working, I'd had my law license and I was working with the Young Gifted and Black, kind of as the elder member of the team. And I would take on these cases pro bono for people who were arrested or, kind of being charged with disorderly conduct for different things. And I would just notice how they were being treated. And they were being treated so mean by some of the judges or talked to kind of disrespectfully, or had kids been held in custody longer than what they need to be held in custody for. So, so I was like, you know what? We don't have a black man or black African American at all in that role, and so I would, I had the minimum amount of years, and I thought, why not take this step and try to lead differently. So that's why I ran.
What was that experience like during the campaign? Had you ever run for office before? And what's kind of the thing that stood out to you most?
I'd never run for I'd never run for office before, but I was pastoring by that time too. So I had a good grasp on at least just listening to people, that you don't always have to be the one speaking, but it is good to be an active listener for people. And so that's what I did. I listened and I learned so much from the people throughout Dane County. And I learned we probably had more in common than what divided us. And just sitting down, talking with so many different groups of people really gave me the strength to know that I could represent this community and do it with dignity and pride.
What is the biggest challenge that you've experienced since you started serving on the bench?
It's probably, working with it's two, I would say it's two challenges. One is, seeing how many children are, because I'm in the juvenile rotation. So most of my cases deal with young people who created juvenile offenses as well as families who lost their children for a number of reasons. And it's just seeing so many people who just have experienced trauma and pain and hurt, and that they have all been really abused, and they haven't been able to find the resources to find people to listen to them and help them work through that process of trauma. And then secondly, I think it's the resistance from certain groups to change so that they could fit those individuals into a narrative where they could be winners and be successful.
I saw a speaking engagement that you did where you were talking about the child wealth child welfare system to prison pipeline and how most people talk about the school to prison pipeline. Why do you think that what you were talking about with child welfare system leading to prison, why do you think that that does not get more attention?
I think because you can't research the child welfare system because it's a confidential system. So there's no metrics to demand that you measure these cases. You can't measure how we don't even measure our juvenile dispositions, how long, who is sending. There's no measurements whatsoever in those confidential cases. So basically, researchers don't have access to the data, and because they don't have access to the data, they can't make a broader assessment about the things uh, that are related to these things. So that's why I think it's so important that I talk about the child welfare, the juvenile delinquency, because of the fact that I'm giving firsthand account, and hopefully I will partner to get more data long term to support that.
So we're not even tracking for success?
I I don't not in a way that they can track for uh, success with, let's say, so concretely with the school to prison pipeline. Like you can have actual
Okay.
data points. There are no data points that you can be able to see right now to decide if this is good, if that's bad, is that a good decision, is that a good placement. Those things don't exist.
Is there a way that you can recommend that other people get more information about this?
Yeah, I'm trying to work with the university. I probably, once all of this COVID stuff has really kind of put a stop on a lot of the stuff that we were trying to do. So we'll, as soon as we get some kind of freedom to, have some meetings and discuss, we probably will jump back in and start trying to figure out a way to, pull data so that we can use data to know we're making, good decisions related to youth and families.
So I came across this quote from you. It says, "We have many opportunities to lead. You have to maximize every space that you're in to make sure that you're maximizing leadership potential." When you speak about maximizing every space, how have you put that into practice during each phase of your adult life, especially early on when you were not being looked at as a leader?
I think, I've always tried my best to, because of how it was my life. You when you grow up and you grow up traumatized, you low income, and all these different metrics about what you're not supposed to be able to do in order to be successful. So no father, no relationship. I've always had the perspective that whatever opportunity I've been given, it's a privilege, and so I need to make sure that that privilege returns back to the community some kind of way. I remember when I first started pastoring, one of the biggest things that was a barrier was the support of our LGBT Q brothers and sisters. And, as an ally, it was one thing to talk about it, but it was another thing for me to be active and practical and demonstrating my concern and love for them. So I remember when I first married a lesbian couple that were members of my church, it made people go crazy because, Black Baptists, that's not something that you do. But I decided that I wanted to do that, and because it was the right thing to do, to stand up for them and stand with them and stand behind them in many respects and give them that love and support. And then secondly, even as a judge, when I first came in, the first thing I saw was, they were bringing in kids in handcuffs, and I was just like, that makes absolutely no sense. Like, how are we a trauma-informed community, but we bringing in kids in handcuffs, regardless of why they're in custody? They could be in custody off for, a disagreement with a foster home parent, and they had nowhere else to go, so they put them in the detention center, and then they bring them in handcuffs, like they criminals. I said, how are we supposed to help them if we're treating them like, baby criminals and we expect them to be different in the future?
When you make a decision that you know might cause some waves, like marrying a lesbian couple in your church or requesting that juveniles not wear handcuffs in your courtroom, how do you prepare for what others might object?
I try to be strategic in my emotions. So I know there are always going to be disagreements. So I try to figure out, okay, what where can I find the strength to stand? Because I know this is the right thing to do. But at the same time, not willing to compromise on what I know is right, just so people will like me. So it can get lonely at times, and it can be very discouraging. But I try to just, focus on the fact that, this couple that I married, they've been together 40 years. They deserve love. They deserve recognition of their love. And maybe the faces of the young people, when they see that I have given them an opportunity to demonstrate that they can be okay, that they in turn will turn back and say, I felt like that judge was fair to me. So I rest in that above anything else.
And has the practice of not having young people wear handcuffs in court, has that kind of spread across the courthouse?
Yeah. So now every juvenile courtroom doesn't they have the presumption where they're not going to restrain kids unless there's a reason to do so. And so throughout the entire courthouse, when we were having hearings, every court hearing now where there's a juvenile, the presumption is that they will come in without handcuffs.
How did that come about? Like, how is that like official?
Yes. Yes, yeah. I
That is awesome.
made it a policy so that everybody's in agreement that this. And the craziest thing is that when I proposed it the first time, and really it was just accepting the push from other people, right? They just needed a judge to say this is something we will champion. And so when I accepted the push from others, it really was it really was me saying, listen, we can do this better, we can do this differently, and let's figure out how we can do this. And they were afraid. They thought kids were going to start turning over tables, kicking over books, and running throughout the courthouse. But up until this day, there have been zero instances of kids acting out in our courtrooms. Uh, so they may get frustrated, they may get upset, but it's not the kind of disturbances that they anticipated when we started this policy a couple years ago.
That is awesome.
Isn't it awesome?
How has the recent surge in Black Lives Matter movement affected you?
Well, it's kind of called me back into the conversation. When Tony Robinson was killed in 2015, it was really an opportunity for us to try to see if we could push for, significant criminal justice reform, policing opportunities for community control of police, really taking investments and placing them in different places, and even removing police officers out of these high schools with these kids. But it always it's like as soon as you start pushing the momentum, it gets bogged down in this committee and that committee, and then ultimately nothing gets done. You could spend a year and a half in meetings after meetings about the meeting that's supposed to happen with the meeting to discuss that meeting. And so you just nothing gets done. So this just allows for us to say, you know what, uh, let's finish the work. We didn't complete it. Let's finish it and get it done. I mean, George Floyd, for many of us, was just another tick on a long list of names that just have led to all kinds of brokenness in our community.
Where was the conversation left? Like you said before, there was some momentum after Tony Robinson in Madison, and then it kind of got stalled. So, where do you think it left off? And as a judge now, how do you see your role in that conversation?
I think MPD, Madison Police Department, they really resisted a lot of the changes at that time. And so they had the ability to stop and put pressure on other people and had everybody kind of scared that, if they follow Black Lives Matter. that they were basically saying blue lives don't matter. They were positing that antithesis in the minds of community members. So I think our job was to educate majority members, especially majority white members, and even those in our black community to understand why these changes were so important. I think as a judge, what I started to see was, I needed to give people the other side of the coin. Like, why is this kind of stuff so important? Why is this, why are people not being prosecuted? And, giving my analysis to cases like Graham versus Connor, which is a Supreme Court case that really law enforcement are really educated and taught uh, related to deadly use of force, and helping community members understand that, because I think they kept asking questions like, well, why this? Why why isn't firing police stopping this? Why isn't firing police chief stopping this? Why won't this stop? And I was going back to the community and saying you have to analyze this from a legal perspective, not just a moral one. And that legal interpretation is what has led us to think about different solutions for a very complex problem. Because until you change that court case, you're gonna keep seeing this over and over again.
What would you say are, let's say, the three most important things that need to be implemented now?
One, there needs to be a federal law that basically overturns Graham versus Connor and establishes a different reasonableness standard, similar to the one that was in Tennessee versus Gardner. I then think, secondly, there needs to be some ways that communities can have oversight of, and specifically communities of color can have input into the oversight of law enforcement where these communities live. And then thirdly, there has to be a way to increase de-escalation of police officers in their certification training. So I would say those are the kind of big three areas that I think are necessary for us to push for.
What is Tennessee versus Connor?
So the Tennessee versus Garner case was a case right before Graham versus Garner, and Graham versus Connor, and that case said that held that it was what was unreasonable for officers at the time was to use force, and it made them justify what use of force they did. Right, in that case, it was a young kid that Tennessee gave permission to shoot people who were running away. And the Supreme Court said, no, it's not unreasonable. You have to look at all of the factors of that the officer had in case. Kid was young, running away. Had no weapons. Those things made the actions unreasonable in the eyes of the court, and that is what I think is still relevant today. Uh, if we went back to that language, it would give a different mode of action for police officers to do. But you got to think about it. They've been trained in Graham versus Connor for almost 30 years now. So, we really need to get back to a place where we hold people responsible for those actions legally.
I think that there's a lot of distrust in institutions in general, and you have your hand in a couple of institutions. You're still a practicing pastor, you're a judge. Why should people continue to believe in these systems and work to make them better?
Oh, that's such a hard question, Anna.
Take your time.
Yeah, I won't. I mean, that's a hard question, man. It is. It is. The reality is that it is difficult because there's so many injustices within these systems. Um, yeah, that sometimes it almost seems like it's just a random act of luck whether or not you get treated fairly or whether or not you don't. So I don't really know what to tell people to believe in. We try to say let's have hope for something, and then when you see what happened in Atlanta, that just calls us right back and to a place of insecurity about what is the next step.
And also being able to have a constructive conversation.
Yes.
What helps you stay positive? Are you feeling positive?
It depends. I'm feeling positive in the fact that I think this time is different than when we tried to do this in 2015. In 2015, I kind of always thought we were alone trying to push against a machine that was already not willing to change. But this time is different. When the African American Council of Churches, the black churches that we work together, when we were putting together that march, for June 7th, we were like, we need to pull everybody together because we need to make sure that racism has no place to hide. And one of the ways that it hides in evangelical white churches. It goes there and it hides there because they may not have familiarity with the struggles of blackness or know how to have conversations about race and religion. And we thought maybe 500 people would come out, to kind of support and show solidarity among our different faith traditions, but it was thousands of people that came out, thousands. And people who were young, old, black, white, Asian, Latino, Native, all came to march together and demonstrate to me, it demonstrated that there are more of us involved and conscious than there were then. And so I think that's the hope, is that makes me feel positive that we can get this done because more people are paying attention than they were before. I mean, you got to think about it. Just 5 years ago, Black Lives Matter was like the most horrific language ever. It was like a terrorist language almost. But this time, everybody's embracing it. It has become something that is norm, and it's just amazing to see how it has shifted in that very short period of time.
You have kids. How many kids do you have?
I got two, a 15 and a 7-year old.
Um, what advice have you given your daughter? She's the 15-year-old, right?
Yep.
What advice have you given to her that you wished someone would have given to you at a young age?
Well, for her, we've tried to um, kind of help her grow up in a place where she trusts that human beings are good people. So on along her life, that's what we have really focused on, is trying to make sure that you believe in the goodness of all human beings and stay strong with that. For my son, it is the same, but for him, he likes to challenge things that don't make sense. Right, a natural inclination inside of him, which is very rewarding to see, is that he doesn't like to see people treated badly. So for him, it is, will you speak up for others when they can't speak up for themselves? I mean, shoot, we were fishing. We went fishing the other day, and we fishing. And you have to take the worm off the hook, put the worm on the hook. And he went ballistic about just using worm. He's like, why? What are you doing to the worm? The worm needs and so we just and that's just in him. That's just a part of how he's always been. So we just teach him, fight for others who can't fight for themselves. Use your voice and your privilege for that.
What did you tell him about the worm?
I said the worm. I try to pull for my Native American brothers and sisters, be like, this is a part of the circle of life. We honor the worm, just like we're gonna honor the fish. And just like you like your Cobras burger, we honor, the cattle that beef is gonna come from.
Did he know what's going to happen to the fish?
Yes. Yeah, we're gonna eat the
Because
fish.
that's a whole other
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, he had to watch that for the first time. It was hard to watch him, fish get filleted. But again, I tried to pull her back into, this circle of life that we live in and give honor and respect to those things that give life so that we can have life.
Is there a particular part of the Bible that you've been focusing on lately?
Um, I try to focus on the ones that talk about justice and empowering people. Um, The Michael text is very important. What does the Lord require of us? And you know, to love justice and walk humbly with our God. It's probably stepped out of my mind a lot. Um, but I've been jumping around a lot trying to look for just different inspirational things that talk about process and love and community and holding people together. Focus on that a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Judge Mitchell. I could listen to you all day. I really appreciate you talking with us. That is all for this episode. For more Lead the Way action, you can find us on Facebook at Lead the Way Podcast to follow all updates for future episode content. This episode was brought to you by the time and talent of Buzz Kemper, Tyler Willenbrink, Natalie Tesh, and Kara Supley. I'm Anna Gaucher. Until next time.